What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Lexus RC F. Huge thanks to Lexus for providing me with this very sweet refreshed RC F to review for you guys today. So about the RC F, well, I've got a few little updates here for 2020, and there's some really nice improvements here, not only just to the exterior and in the interior, but also mechanically. It's got 5 more horsepower now. It's about 55 pounds lighter here for all RCFs. And then this one goes one step further with this carbon fiber package, which I'll get to in a minute. But overall, you know, the changes here up front I really like. So it's very mild. The main thing here are these new triple beam LED headlamps, which look very cool to me. I also still just love this hood, the way that it's kind of bulging upwards and has the nice little vent there. Nice aggressive front bumper as well, with a little bit of a more aggressive grille than before. And so you'll see that carbon fiber front lip and all the other bits of carbon fiber. This has a carbon fiber roof. And even the speed activated spoiler in the back is now carbon fiber. That is part of a performance package upgrade you can get, but it's $11,400 on this vehicle. And as much as I do enjoy the carbon fiber, and it does actually make it a little bit lighter, especially with the lower center of gravity you get with the carbon fiber roof, that's a high price to pay. So I personally would probably skip the carbon fiber, but if you love carbon fiber, maybe it'll be worth it to you. Otherwise though, the RCF looks fantastic here still. I really like these 19-inch BBS forged wheels that look spectacular with the Brembo brakes hiding behind them and the slotted rotors. I also love the bulging fenders you have up front here with this nice large vent there. And then even going down towards the rear and the back of the vehicle, you'll see those hips it has in the rear there really bulges out like crazy. And it's really something you have to appreciate in 3 dimensions in person, because even on video, it doesn't really come off just how dramatic the bulges on the fenders are on this vehicle. It's very, very cool. Other cool things there going out towards the back, again, that speed activated spoiler, which nicely stands out here on the white car with the carbon fiber. And then just the new taillights there, which are darker and smokier in their appearance, which are a nice improvement. You also have carbon fiber on the rear diffuser there, and also the F version's very unique stacked tailpipes there, which are also a very cool thing that all Fs have had in the past 10 years since the F division was established. And so overall, the RCF here is just, you know, a sharper vehicle now in both its visual appearance and also as far as its performance goes. As for the interior of the 2020 RCF, well, it's mostly the same as before, and I did just review the RCF Track Edition, which has the same interior basically, so you can go watch that video if you want to hear a little bit more in depth. I'm going to be a little briefer here in this video, but it still is the same great place as it always has been, just with a couple minor tweaks. So anyway, first thing, sitting down in these seats, I really love the design on these ones in particular. This spec is really sharp with the white and black leather combined, and they're really supportive seats. Nice big bolsters that don't have any adjustability to them, but you do have lumbar adjustments and all the usual stuff, but they just really hug you nicely. Now I will say, if you have broader shoulders, this part kind of tapers in towards your shoulders and might kind of squeeze you a little bit more in that way, but for me, I don't have any issues, so it'll just depend on your height and build. But overall, very comfortable seats as well. They're heated and ventilated here in this one with the premium package it has. Next to the steering wheel here, which is really fantastic. A nice beefy wheel with a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, and then just a couple of buttons on the front of it, and then paddle shifters on the back, which are plastic unfortunately, but feel okay and are nicely positioned. Gauges are also the same great gauges you've had here in years past in the F models, and they're fantastic. I love the large digital tack there in the middle. The analog speedometer is a nice touch, and then all the other digital stuff there on the left hand side. And so this is an F model. In addition to the normal trip information, you also have all your F modes there, and so it'll basically just give you a lap timer, G-force meter, and the rear wing position. And then since this one has the optional torque vectoring differential, it'll show you torque distribution as well, but that's only if you have that torque vectoring rear diff. And really nice attractive gauges. I also love how you know, whenever you change the drive mode or the differential mode, it'll reflect it up there, and I love the different looks for the tack there whenever you change those. And so great gauges. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, now it did get this updated screen a couple of years ago. Now it's a 10.3-inch widescreen display, higher resolution, has this new menu system, which is a nice improvement over the older Lexus setup. It still isn't fantastic though, because you know, you still have to use this touchpad to navigate around everything, and you know, changing radio stations and things like that is a little more difficult. Now you do have a tune knob, so you can just spin that if you want, but if you want to actually go through a menu, it's just unnecessarily complicated with hitting like satellite radio, and then what genre do you want, and then hitting and going into you know, all the different stations that are listed. So a little clumsy still, but Lexus is coming around. We know the new 2020 RX has a touchscreen, and I'm sure they're going to, you know, be revising other stuff. One nice update this system does have for 2020 that's brand new is Apple CarPlay integration in the RC F. A couple of the other Lexuses got it last year, but now we have it here in the RC F for 2020. Really great to have that. Unfortunately, no luck for Android users. That is another thing that Lexus, like with the 2020 RX, does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but here in the RC F and most other Lexuses right now, it's only Apple CarPlay. So you're out of luck if you're an Android user for most of these Lexus models, but hopefully that changes soon. Otherwise, though, you know, just a nice setup there. The maps do look dated. That is one thing that definitely needs an improvement and an update. One of the great things, though, is even though the infotainment experience isn't great, it is paired up to a fantastic stereo. This is this Mark Levinson premium surround sound stereo that is part of the navigation bundle. So all combined, this package for this stereo is $2,750, but it does give you this 17 speaker 835 watt stereo system, which doesn't sound like massive numbers with these days and bloated you know, stereo wattage ratings and things like that, but this sounds so good. It also has Clarify, so it nicely cleans up satellite radio sound signals, and so it just makes, I mean, it's a very incredible sound experience. It's just very bassy, very strong, very crisp and clear as well. I absolutely love this Mark Levinson stereo, and if you're an audiophile, definitely probably worth the upgrade. Anyway, coming down, you have a nice analog clock, and then you also have your climate controls, which I've always liked how it's separate, so you don't have to mess with the screen for that, and you know, you just have this little slider here, which is actually very responsive and easy to use, so really nice there. And then, like I said, you have your volume and tune knobs, which are actually like heavy ceramic and really feel very high quality, honestly, and so nice to have those. And you do still have a CD drive here in the RCF, which is also something that's pretty rare these days. And then you just have a few buttons here for everything else, your drive mode selector, and that's about it. So as you will see, moving on to the storage space here in the RCF, it's not great. This is where it's starting to show its age, since the RCF's been around since 2014. And so, you know, you have no bin here in the middle. In the doors, you have a pocket, which is long, but doesn't have a bottle holder or anything. You just have two cup holders, and then the center armrest, which is covered in Alcantara in this one. And you open that up, and you have a pretty shallow space, but it does fit, you know, like a sunglass case, things like that. You also will find a power outlet, two USB jacks, and an auxiliary jack in there, but that is it. And so even the muscle car competitors and some of the German, you know, sports cars in this segment have more storage space than this does. So, but it is a sporty vehicle, so that's something that usually most people don't care about too much. Another thing that people usually don't care about in sports cars, but I'll mention it anyway, is the back seat here in the RCF, which is actually fairly usable. So I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I do actually fit without being squished. So I have maybe an inch of legroom to spare there. It's a tight fit, but I do have space. I have headroom as well. And you know, they have their own air vents back there. There's also two cup holders behind a nice little cover and a full down center armrest. So some nice amenities back there for a coupe, and so it is actually usable. Definitely more usable than the LC500's back seat. Still wouldn't want to use it every day, but nice to have in a pinch. And then the trunk space in the RCF here is pretty average for a coupe. You know, it's a pretty decent length. It's not too deep, so it is a little bit smaller as far as depth goes versus some of the larger competitors, like maybe a Challenger or a Camaro or something like that. But still a good amount of space. There isn't really much under the floor there, other than your kind of spare tire, fix-a-flat kit kind of thing, and that's about it. But anyway, you know, still a good amount of space there in the trunk. And so all things considered, you know, for a sports coupe, I'd say it's on average as far as practicality goes. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The RCF here has the nice Lexus key. This one's in this leather pouch, and just the basic buttons there on the back of it. Still a plastic key, wish that was a little bit nicer. But of course, is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it roars to life. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 RCF. So the first thing you notice, I think, about this, the first thing I notice, I think, is the throttle response. It definitely requires a lot of travel. Part of that, I think, is because it's always in this eco mode until you go beyond a certain threshold, and then it kind of comes alive a little bit. But until that point, it is definitely a little bit more relaxed with its throttle. Another thing to note here is steering is actually nice and light. Lighter than a lot of the muscle cars and some of the sportier competitors, which even in their lightest modes are still fairly heavy. This is a little more comfortable, and so from a daily driver standpoint, I think this is definitely a little bit easier and more luxurious to live with than some of the sportier competitors that this competes against. And so other things here, brake has a good amount of travel before you start getting into the meat of the brakes as well. So everything's a little bit more slack, I guess, in their setup, at least, you know, whenever you're just in the normal mode here. Other things though is the visibility is great here in the RCF. Since you do sit a little bit lower though, the hood is something that you do see, especially since it bulges up a little bit higher than a normal RC. And so, you know, you are kind of, it gives you a little bit of like a muscle car type experience where you're looking out over hood a little bit. It doesn't drop down in typical Japanese fashion where usually that doesn't get in the way too much. But this is more of a muscle car than the average Japanese vehicle, so I really appreciate that. But nice thin A-pillars, nice large side windows, you know, everything, even seeing out of the back, is pretty good. The exhaust is also pretty tame here whenever you're just cruising along. And definitely more subdued and quieter than the newest muscle cars, which often have, you know, a louder exhaust system. And I think it actually is a little bit quieter even than what you get with stuff like M4s, C63s, and stuff like that. Although they, of course, all have the multi-mode exhaust as well, which this unfortunately doesn't have. But you do get a lot of great induction note, which you'll hear in a second, that the competitors don't have. All right, so let's go ahead and put it up into the Sport Plus mode here. Let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. Wanted to spin those rear wheels, and then it takes off very, very nicely. I love, there's that induction note of this naturally aspirated engine. It sounds so good. Oh man. Oh, I can listen to that all day. Oh man, so the RCF here thankfully still is a naturally aspirated 5-liter V8 engine. It does 472 horsepower, 5 more than it used to, and then it does 395 pound-feet of torque. So not a torquey motor, you know, it definitely likes to be revved out. The red line's around 7,200 RPMs there, but it's just such linear, consistent power. It's not peaky in any way, and so it gives you a very predictable driving experience, even though it is a little bit tail-happy. I mean, it was breaking the tires loose there whenever I stomped on it, and that's impressive considering we also do have upgraded tires here for 2020. It now runs Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires. They're 255s in the front and 275s in the rear. So you got some sticky, really great summer tires, and it's still wanting to break those free, even with 395 pound-feet of torque. So, I mean, this thing definitely is lively, and that's one of the things that I really appreciated about the RCF. Also, throttle response is much sharper here in the Sport Plus mode, so that's very much appreciated. One thing you'll notice is that, you know, now this road's pretty rough, so you can hear some road noise there, but I will say that it's not the most refined driving experience, but I think a lot of the competitors, even like the Mercedes C63, you get a good amount of road noise, and M4 might be a little bit more refined, I guess, but you know, that's just kind of par for the course with these sportier sport coupes, regardless of the company, although the muscle cars do isolate you a little bit better, but they're also a little bit heavier. But we're coming up with some corners here, so I'm going to put the torque vectoring differential into its slalom mode, and let's go on these corners here and see how it handles them. Wow, yeah, really nice grip. And that torque vectoring diff, it really works wonders. I loved it in the GSF that had it. Now it's an option in this. It's not standard. It's $1,250. I think it's worth the money though, because it really transforms, especially in the slalom mode here. It's just amazing how well it works to just get this thing going around corners. So all RCFs here are lighter for 2020 as well. So they've lost about 55 pounds over the previous year. And so that puts it right around 3,900 pounds. But now this one has this carbon fiber package, which I said is $11,400, and that does drop some weight. So I think at this point we're probably somewhere in the 3,800 range, and that makes it right in line with like the muscle cars. Like my Mustang Bullet is right around that type of weight, like 3,850 or something, and this feels lighter by far than that. So that's a feel thing and a tuning thing. This does have an adaptive suspension setup, like you know, the Magna Ride and the Mustangs that you can get, and the Camaros have their magnetic ride control and stuff. So it's you know, got those similar types of things, although this one isn't a magnetic setup, I don't think. But it's just amazing how much lighter this feels than those. Even the Camaro, which handles fantastically, the Camaro I think has a little bit more grip than this does, but I think this just feels lighter. It's a more natural and fluid feel for the handling, and it's mostly up front. The nose is just lighter, and I noticed this whenever whenever I reviewed the RCF Track Edition a couple of weeks ago, that, you know, has a carbon fiber hood though, and you know, it had more extensive light weighting done to it. Like it had carbon ceramic brakes, which are lighter than the steel rotors you have on this vehicle. But even still, this still retains a lot of that same lightness up front. And so when you compare this to other V8 powered sports coupes, and even stuff like the M4, which doesn't have a V8, it's amazing how this still just has this lightness to the front end of it. And I've heard other reviewers complaining about the weight of these, and I don't know, maybe if you're autocrossing this, you'll start complaining about the weight. But now, especially with the new weight loss, this is right in line with the weight that you get with most of the competitors. So I don't think you can say that weight is an issue for these anymore like it might have been in the past. And so because of that, I mean, this is fantastic, and I think it's every bit as good of a handler now as, you know, most of the competitors are with their similarly equipped setups. You know, like the Mustang Performance Pack has same tire sizes and everything, same weight. So we're talking a very close comparison as far as performance and specs go. And this feels a little more lively. You also have this 8-speed automatic transmission, which is, you know, a pretty good transmission if you leave it in automatic mode. Now, if you have it in manual mode, it will be quick if you're actually getting on it. So if you're not getting on it, I mean, downshifts are pretty fast for an automatic, but it's the upshifts if you're at low throttle position where it's quick, but it's not lightning fast. But then if we'll go down, now if I go full attack, full throttle, and then manual shift, that's where it's a little quicker and bangs into gear very nicely. So the 8-speed automatic is good. I think some of the newest automatics from some of the competitors might be a little bit better, but I will say, like, for example, with the Mustang's 10-speed, that likes to jump around a lot more. This doesn't jump around to find the right gear. It doesn't skip around like that does, which can be quite annoying in the 10-speed in the Mustangs. This, it's very direct and, you know, just picks a gear and sticks with it and lets the engine work it out. Yeah, let's go for another acceleration. Yeah, and the front end lifts up too, and it's very dramatic. Yeah, this thing is a blast. Oh, these are spectacular. Ah, man, yeah. So, you know, I'm so glad I've been having a chance here in the past few weeks to review the RCF, because for a while, you know, I did like the RC 350 several years ago, and that's nice because you can get it with all-wheel drive, and that V6 actually sounds good, and it's a good amount of power, even though it feels a little heavier, you know, whenever you only have a V6 propelling it. And so that definitely was something where it could have used more power, but it was enough. And so now I'm just so happy to be able to, this V8 that I love from the other Lexus products combined with the cool looks of the RC here and the great performance this has, it is all very, very impressive. Now, I will say that if you do want to do track driving, because of how expensive this is with the performance package and stuff, this one is almost $90,000 as tested, which I'll get more to that a little bit later on. With the Track Edition only being like, what, $95,000 or so, $96,000, at that price, you know, for $6,000 more, you get a carbon fiber hood, the larger carbon fiber rear spoiler, and you also get extra light weighting measures. So I think those are down about 150 odd pounds over a normal RCF. So it's lighter, and you get those carbon ceramic brakes, which in some vehicles, carbon ceramic brakes are like $8,000 alone. So when you compare it, when you know, add those plus a carbon fiber hood and a carbon fiber wing and more lightweight stuff, all that stuff for only $6,000 or so more over this makes the Track Edition look like a bargain if you can find one. They're only making 50 of them here for the States, and so it's going to be a very rare vehicle. And so this is great. You can get most of the Track Edition stuff here with the normal RCF if you miss out on your chance to get a Track Edition. But if you can get a Track Edition, I would certainly go for it. I think it's going to hold its value better since it's so rare, and you got a car that is going to be very stout on the track. And that also has a different limited slip diff, which I talked about more in my Track Edition review. You can go watch. But I do love the torque vectoring diff in this one. I think I actually kind of prefer that a little bit because the Track Edition is very tail happy, and this is too, but I kind of like how this feels a little more nimble with the torque vectoring diff that it has. You really have to test drive one to appreciate the lighter nose. And coming out of the muscle cars and even stuff like M4s, which feel really heavy, honestly, this feels lighter than an M4 to me. Now, it's been a few years since I've driven an M4, but that's just my off-the-cuff take here, is that this really feels a little bit lighter. But yeah, this thing just has so much grip with these new tires. Improving the tires is such a huge thing. They also did retune several other things. The transmission has been retuned. They also retuned the suspension setup to take advantage of the lighter components now that this has, and some of the tweaks and stuff. So everything has been worked over here for 2020. It's not like it's just a mild, facelift and that's it. They really did go through this a good bit, and so I obviously have not driven the older RCFs to compare, but I will say that this feels really sharp and fantastic, and also pretty comfortable too. Now we're back on this rougher road here, but it still does just feel really nice and comfortable as far as the daily driver goes. But I'm going to be driving this vehicle around for an entire week, so I'm going to get more developed impressions, and I'll come back and give you guys my updated impressions as well as my final real-world fuel economy here and more thoughts on that price. Alright, so I've been driving the RCF for a week now, and I've put 132 miles on it here in my week of driving it, and it's a really sweet car. I love this thing. I really do enjoy just everything about this. The whole combo of, just having a normal automatic, having a naturally aspirated V8, and then these gorgeous looks. It really is a sweet package. So, in my time of driving here, I averaged 17.1 mpg, which is actually not too bad. These are rated at 16 in this city, believe it or not, 24 on the highway, and 19 combined. Now, I did do a little more highway driving than I usually do, but it still wasn't a 50-50 split, so I wasn't really expecting to get that 19 number, and so to be, 17.1, I'm pretty happy with that, for a V8. Now, I mean, it depends on what you compare it to. Obviously, this is the same kind of fuel economy I get in full-size 3-row SUVs, but when you're buying one of these, I don't think fuel economy is going to be too much of a concern, especially at this price point. And that's really the last thing to mention here is the pricing of the RCF, and they start around $65,000 for the base price. That's not bad, and some of the options on here are options I would want, like there's this like premium package which gives you the heated and ventilated seats, heated steering wheel, all those types of things. The upgraded stereo system I would definitely want for sure, but because I'm not obsessed with losing a few pounds of weight on the vehicle, and I'm not obsessed with carbon fiber like many enthusiasts are, I would definitely skip the $11,400 carbon fiber package. And so even though this one is almost at $90,000, if you remove that package, this one also had this intuitive park assist thing, which was $500. So basically knock off 12 grand off of that price. You're looking at about a $78,000 price on one of these, the way I would configure it. I think the way most people would configure it. So at $78,000, it does start to make a little more sense. At that point you're around the M4 pricing, you're around C63 territory, those types of vehicles, and actually coming in a little bit beneath those, the way most people usually equip them. And so you can look at it as a value proposition in that regard. I still think though, there are a few nice changes, like Apple CarPlay is really, really nice. I did try that out, and on this widescreen display, it's really great. So you have some nice things like that if you value those things, then getting a 2020 model could be worthwhile if you have the amount of money to go up to those kind of prices. But if you don't, there's a very strong case to be made for used ones, and that obviously it doesn't help Lexus sell new ones, but you can still get an RCF from a couple of years ago, even with fairly low miles and like a certified one or something like that. You can get those, in the 40s now. Some even will go just below 40,000, and but a nice one, you're talking about 40s, or maybe low 50s, something like that. And they make a lot more sense at that price point. Now, it still is going to be more expensive than a comparable Mustang or Camaro or something like that, but it gives you that luxury feel. You still have basically the same interior and lots of really nice stuff at that price point. That, I think, is the better value, just because Lexus is so famous for reliability that, I would have a hard time recommending someone buy a 3 or 4 year old Mercedes or Audi or BMW or something like that, because those can turn into basket cases after, they're getting older in age. Once they get out of their lease period, that's when things start to seem to go bad. versus the Lexus, you're not going to have those kinds of worries. And this is a vehicle, you know, you can buy used and hold for a long time and not be worried about it turning into a money pit like, you know, most of the competitors do. As it sits new, and if you want this carbon fiber package, like I said earlier, you know, you're probably just better off going for the track edition if you can find one, because those will almost certainly hold their value better. And I love the LC 500, and even like a certified used one of those, you can get those in the like low 80s now as well, with 12 to 15,000 miles on them. As sweet as the RCF is, as much as I love the looks, I love the sound, you get the same sound on the LC 500 in a much more attractive package in my opinion. The LC is just jaw-droppingly gorgeous, and so the fact that, you know, you can have a 1 or 2 year old LC 500 for the same money as a new 2020 RCF, yeah, you probably won't get the Apple CarPlay in a 2018 LC 500 because they had that, I think, for 19 or 20. But I would give that up in exchange for the much sexier looks of the LC. So that would be my pick if I'm spending, you know, 90 grand or so at the Lexus dealer. And honestly, you can get a brand new LC 500. I think they start around 92. Obviously, they won't have all the options that this one has, and so you're not really comparing apples to apples there. But you know, you're close enough to an LC 500. Most people shopping in this price range can budge a little bit one way or the other, and so I think I would still recommend the LC 500 over the RCF. I think the LC 500 is a little more focused. It's a little more of a driver's car in my opinion. You also have the better 10-speed automatic in the LC 500 versus the 8-speed you have in this. This 8-speed's fine, it's just showing its age. It's the same transmission they've used for several years now, and it works well enough, but it is still a few times where I catch it off guard, and you know, I'm wishing that it would downshift faster than it does. And the LC 500, I didn't spend an entire week in the V8 version. I only did a week-long review of the V6, but that 10-speed that I did review in the V8 version, it never let me down in the few hours that I was driving it around. So I'm in camp LC 500 if you're buying a sweet V8 powered luxury sports coupe. And so yeah, that would be my choice there. But no matter what, they're all great choices. But one last little compliment I gotta give the Lexus here is just how solid this is. It's pretty refined and luxurious, of course, it's a Lexus, but it just feels so solidly built. And even some of the Germans, that's not always a guarantee these days. And this it feels so solid and well put together, and you really feel like you're rolling around in a quality product, if that makes any sense. But anyway, that's about all I have here on the RCF. It's a fantastic vehicle. It's so much fun to live with, so much fun to drive. And huge thanks to Lexus for providing me with the RCF here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the RCF in the comments below, and whether you'd pick it or the LC 500. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.